Hello everyone, Rudros here, and welcome to my very first question and answer session. Got quite a few questions submitted either through the Discord or on the YouTube comments, so let's jump right into them and see what they go. Yeah, here we go. Final Max asks, exactly what in FFTCG design would you like changed? Not necessarily the EX Burst issue, as you have expounded on that enough, but what else would you like further refinements on? Well, if we were to go the bare minimum, I would like to see some updates to old mechanics, and this is the bare minimum. So obviously EX Burst, one of them, I'd like to see it use the stack at the absolute bare minimum. Freeze as a mechanic. I think Freeze is kind of overdue for an update. People have been clamoring for a while. Freeze needs to affect active characters in some way, whether that leads to a shatter, they don't have abilities, whatever. So those are some old ones. Beyond that, I have just been playing the game long enough that I've just gotten bored of it, and what was once new is now old hat. I think the game over relies on enter the field effects. I think it was 2 opuses ago I checked, and over half of the cards had the words when it enters the field, do such and such and such. And so that kind of just makes for very stale gameplay to me, because everything, okay, well, you enter, you do your thing. You enter, you do your thing. So I would like to see the design expanded beyond that. A big part of that could be new card type. I've said this in a few places that we haven't actually gotten a new card type since Opus 4 with monsters. That was 15 sets ago. 15 sets, and we haven't gotten a single new card type. And so I would love to see something new. Give me something like a Planeswalker in Magic. Give me something like equipment. Give me something like a stadium field. Whatever you want to think of. But I would just like to see more expanded design in the game. So I would say, yeah, those are the biggest things I would like to see change. Oh, also, of course, bans. You have to have more bans. If you were building a house, imagine if you were getting lumber, and you could only ever add to that lumber. You could never take it away. So you have a 6-foot piece and you need to be 5 feet. And imagine if, you can't cut off 5 feet. You actually have to find 3 smaller 2-foot pieces and stick them together. And then, like anything, you should be able to add and subtract. So it's kind of silly we only add and not subtract. But those are the things I would say in a quick session. I'm sure I could come up with more if you gave me more and more time. But initially, more design space. I think a mill deck would be cool. I love the mill deck in Magic. They don't seem to want that in FF. They seem to want it to just be straight, you deal 7 points of damage and that's it. But I would like to see alternate win conditions too. Like Giga Graviton Sin is a cool idea. It's just way, way too hard to pull off. So alternate win conditions. I mean, Exodia is, I think, one of the coolest things ever from Yu-Gi-Oh! So that whole creature monster idea alone is probably what got me into that show in the first place. So there you go. Firewolf / the Burger Man asks, most and least enjoyable Opus sets since you've started playing, and why? Most enjoyable is very easy. Opus 10. I really liked the cards in that set. I liked that it featured a lot of prominent Final Fantasy characters. That was also the 3rd set release since I started playing, so it's still very new to me. It was also the very last set that we had a Worlds competition at, and it was the last set that my locals had before Opus 11 came out, because right about the time Opus 11 came out, the pandemic hit, and that shut everything down. So easily Opus 10 is my favorite. Least favorite was just what I said, Opus 11, mainly because, I thought the format was just miserable to play in. To me, that was the very first signs of really bad power creep. You had undeniable power creep in the old Opus 1 summons that all got updates and they had stronger versions. And then March Ritz, Braska's Final Aeon, Kadaj were just miserable to play against. There was very few counters to them. And then again, I couldn't even play in person, so I had to do all this through online means. I didn't have a job at the time. The pandemic had shut everything down, so Opus 11 was just miserable to play in. So those would be my 2 choices. Transcendent Lance asks, what mechanic do you believe needs more touching upon? And a second question, and your opinion on SE's handling of the Materia Cups and OP, I'm assuming, which stands for Organized Play. What mechanic do I believe needs more touching upon? So kind of what I said in the first question, assuming we're not talking about something brand new, just something that exists as is. So, of course, EX Burst is the first thing that comes to mind, but I'll try to stay away from that one because I think most people know my feelings on that one. So let me just throw something out there entirely since I also mentioned freeze. Action abilities. Action abilities, I think, like, the way they work is fine. I would like to see more counters to them and maybe going in with that special ability. Specials are unique to this game, right? Magic has action abilities. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has stuff equivalent to action abilities. Specials are unique to Final Fantasy, and they just never use it. And it's an inherently risky idea, right? As long as you have the single name rule that I can only have one copy of card name Alua on the field, then having your deck full of other Aluas is inherently bad for the player and the deck builder because they're dead cards when you've already got one on the field. Now, obviously, Alua, I brought her up because she had an amazing special, so you could feed other copies of her into that special. I really liked Alex Hancock's idea talking about the Prish legend from, I don't know, what was it, Opus 17? The monk one that technically had a special. It was an action ability, but it was like a soft special because it's a discarded card. Prish gains 2,000 power. But if it's card named Prish, it gets 4,000 power, so it doubles the potency. And I would like to see more cards like that. You know, FF6 is one of my favorite decks. Play with the Sabin. Let me discard Duncan. Let me discard any 6 card. You know, it doesn't have to be as generic as discard any card, but say discard a 6 card, get effect X. If it happens to be card named Sabin, you get X plus. So specials absolutely could be expanded upon. As far as the second question, opinion of Essie's handling the Materia Cups and OP, I'll be honest, I have a very limited opinion on this because it's kind of only relevant to me. I know a lot of people out there feel a lot of different ways. So the only thing I honestly think about it is that I do wish when they had first announced Worlds was coming back, it was probably like last November or something, I would have loved for that announcement to have contained everything. It's coming back. Here's how you get there. Here are the dates. Here's the stores that'll be hosting them. Because we didn't get that till like maybe it was February 2023, maybe March. And so the one Materia Cup I could like physically go to, it was the closest to me. I can't because it happened to be the one weekend I already had a pre-planned vacation, which if I had known about it ahead of time, I could have planned around that. So that's the only thing I honestly really thought about was that, man, I wish I just, and hopefully next year they can do that. The sooner we can get all that information, absolutely the better, because I'm willing, to plan around it, but I have to know, we didn't know any of that information. So that's for me. The pricing seems to be very, very good from what I can tell. Obviously I haven't gone to one of these, but we just had one. It seemed like everyone really liked the pricing. So yeah, if you were hoping for more, I'm sorry, but I honestly just don't have a big opinion on it past that. So Blood Fist, lesser mad scientist asks, he has 2 questions. What do you believe the current tier list looks like? A tier 1, 1.5, 2. And 2, how do you think the tier list has evolved over the course of the life of the game? Bloodfist, I don't get too into tier lists, so I apologize in advance if this answer is going to be disappointing. I just view it more as, is archetypes the right word? Or deck types? So aggro, obviously I think 13 is the best form of aggro. You can also put things like Magissa up there. I guess Ice Lightning. I don't know if that's real aggro. If that's more like an aggro mid-range hybrid. Mid-range, probably Mono Water and Soiree, whatever Soiree mix, Warrior Light and all that. It's probably your strong mid-range ones. And then late game is, of course, whatever version of Wind you want. Mono Wind, Wind Ice, technically Wind Lightning and Wind Earth probably as well, although I think Ice Wind and Mono Wind are the 2 most common forms. Beyond that, everything's just probably falls somewhere beyond that. And then when I think of tiers too, because of course we just had the Materia Cup, and I'm sure some people will be like, oh, but look, Final Fantasy VI made it to the finals. It's like, yeah, it did. I still don't think that deck is that great. I think if you run that deck against one deck that has a good matchup against, 10 times in a row, it's going to get destroyed. So yeah, generally that's how I tend to think of a matchup or a deck. If I run Soiree against Ice Lightning 10 times in a row against the same person, what's the ratio going to be? 7-3, 8-2, 5-5, whatever. Yeah, same with Mono Wind. If you run Mono Wind against anything that's not aggro, it's going to destroy you. Once it gets set up, it just wins the game. So that's kind of how I thought of that. How do you think the tier list has evolved over the course of the life of the game? Wind has always been dominant since I have played, whatever form it has taken. The only time Wind wasn't dominant was Opus 14, where it was stronger than it ever was, but decks like Verstale, Stern Chocobos, and Doga ended the game so quickly, Wind actually wasn't able to get set up. But, and I'll quote Matisky here, I promise you, if they weren't dying so fast, nothing else would compete with a Wind deck. Even Stern and that stuff, Wind had so many ways to deal with that card, it just died before it ever got to that point. So form of Wind has always obviously been top notch as far as like just consistency. And then there's usually some aggro deck, whether it's 13 or Doga or March Ritz, or no, they weren't really aggro. Avalanche is another one. So yeah, you always have your Wind version, your Sky Pirates, and if anything, the only way it has evolved is through power creep, in my opinion. Cheaper and free. I've been saying it for a while. Cheaper and free. That's the biggest design they go in on. It's cheaper and it's free. It's cheaper and it's free. What makes FF6 work? When Sabin from Edgar for free gets to blow something off your board. When Lena for free gets to bring Leviathan onto the field. It doesn't cost you hand size. You know, it costs you a bunch of cards you couldn't use anyway. you know, Sophie for free at the end of the turn by just existing killed your opponent and drew you further cards. So cheaper and free is, I think, how the tier list has evolved and how it'll continue to evolve. Look at Warrior of Light. Warrior of Light is such a strong card in this opus. Why? Because it doesn't cost anything. Yeah, there's a deck building cost that you have to get set up, but Soiree exists, so you were already building that anyway. But then once it's there, it's cheap. You know, it literally, it costs you nothing. It doesn't cost you a backup, doesn't cost you the card in hand because it replaces itself, and it's just this big bully. So cheaper and free, that's how it has evolved. That's how it will continue to evolve if the design space does not change. Knight137 asks, backups that search backups, why it's good, and the lists of the best ones and the colors they can support. I'm not going to give a full list here. I believe Knight has quite a full list, so you can reach out to Knight if you want to get that. I just don't have the means to give you an entire list right now, but I can just name a few off the top of my head. Obviously, the Sarah backup from Opus 13, which searches out the Royals. Nordstalin continues to be a key piece of any Wind deck. We got the new one, Buddy, in this set. Buddy can search out Riku. I can tell you why they're good. So assuming your game plan is to play backups, you're not trying to kill someone in 2 turns with 13 where you can ignore backups. But if your game plan is to play backups, if you see Nordstalin in hand turn 1, you know, Nordstalin actually means you have 2 backups because the Nordstalin will search out the next one. And what's really nice too is if you're playing a 2-color deck like Ice Wind or Wind Water and Guardians, and then the Nordstalin or the Buddy can go search out another element, Riku, which can get you your other elements, or Nordstalin can go search out Uke or, you know, the Stiltskin or whatever you want. So now you're kind of color fixed immediately, and you didn't have to rely on top decking to get there. So that's obviously why it's good. Also, backups are good till you get the 5th one, right? After that, you actually don't want to see backups. You know, it's kind of like Magic and land and Magic. If your deck really wants to be on about 6 land, in an ideal world, you put 6 land in the deck, you draw them all immediately, and then you just draw gas for the rest of the game, and you're not getting clogged with lands. Same with FF and backups. You only put 17, 16, 15 backups in there because you want a higher chance to see them to get yourself set up. But once you're set up, they don't do you any good. So when a backup can search a backup, not only is it giving you that consistency, it's also thinning the deck out. You know, there were some times in some old Chocobo matchups, like when I was practicing with my girlfriend, just kind of old, like 100% Chocobo decks, where I would use Azana to search out a copy of Fat Chocobo, even though I already had it, just to say, hey, I'm in a good position right now. This way I won't draw this card later, like when I really need, okay, I need a forward to stay alive. Oh, I drew this dead backup. So yeah, the consistency, filtering out the deck of cards that you don't want to see after that, and so you can get your good cards later in the game, that's 100% why it's good. Soranoka asks, best cards from the older opuses 1 through 6 that are still getting to see some action. Well, the first one that obviously comes to mind is Shantoto. Shantoto, is it an immortal card? Well, that card, surely they haven't printed a better board wipe since then. In the very first opus, they've established for 1 CP, you remove everything on the board forward-wise. Remove, so it doesn't go to the break zone. You don't get break zone triggers. It just outright gets rid of it on the field, and it does it on both sides. And it gives you a backup that then color fixes you and gives you every color you could want. I mean, that card is just beautiful design, and they've clearly struggled to like emulate it or print something that keeps up with it. And I can't ever see it going away other than straight power creep if they print like a 5-cost Shantoto that does the exact same thing. Shantoto's the biggest one. Other than that, I mean, I still do like the anthems, your Duke Larg and Ice, your Lebreau and Fire, your Waka and Water, but no one really uses them anymore, and they definitely are less and less relevant. I would love to see an update of those. Give us a reprinted version of those that cost 2, they're an anthem effect, and then give them some other additional effect that says, this only works if you're playing mono, though. If you're mono Water, now this Waka also lets you do whatever else, etc. I'm trying to think. There's not a whole lot from like Opus 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Are there any other really old goodies? Probably, I still think Opus 3 Causes a Dane is still relevant, even though it's been traded out for very broken Zidanes. That card's still great. That card still has the best discard effect in the game. There is no ice card that straight has the effects that Dane has. The closest thing is like Irwin, and you have to play him specifically in soirees. There's no just generic, enters the field, give me the best card in your hand. Thank you very much. In ice, in the discard element. Insane. Opus 3 Phoenix is actually probably just going to get better and better as time goes on because cards got cheaper and cheaper. You know, back then, there weren't a whole lot of great 2 costs and 1 cost, so that Phoenix was only so-so because you were kind of, you got this revival, but you were trading for the fact that it was a pretty weak forward. But nowadays, 2 costs are just bonkers and out of control, so Phoenix will get stronger and stronger. I still like the Edward backup from Opus 5, but is it relevant? Probably not, but it's in my heart one of the best ones because I just think it's a cool backup and really fit that ice game plan. Beyond that, I mean, you'll see some stuff that fits categories, right? Like Fat Chocobo Legend is still a good ramp out for Wind. Lock still works well with the Category 6 stuff. So you'll see stuff that's relevant for categories. But like easily Shantoto is the most like universal one. Like you can kind of slap that anywhere as long as, you're playing Earth. Katsumoto asks how to convince newer players power creep is real and older Opus usually are outclassed in many ways. How do you approach it strategically to help them understand and to progress faster? I guess if it was me, usually I would try to do a direct comparison to whatever cards they're hanging on to. Let's say they like old Opus 1 Furion, who he's a 4-cost 8K who just says when he enters the field, choose a 4, deal at 4,000 damage. Put that card side by side next to Squall, which says when Squall attacks, deal 4,000 damage to the entire board. He's also a 4-cost 8K, and he also has additional effects after that. There's no world where if you're trying to do 4K to something that you would play that Furion over Squall. And maybe you could quibble and say, oh, well, that one's on entry. Squall's got to wait to attack, sure. But, that's a good example. Show the old Opus 1 summons, the Opus 1 Shiva, that does, 5K to a Dull Forward? Compare that to the Opus 11 Shiva. That's for the same cost, same EX burst as 6K to a Dull Forward. Like there's no reason to pick that card. So I would just try to find a very comparable card and then put it side by side. It was like, man, I know you're hanging on to this Opus 2. This was an example someone brought up maybe back in Opus 10, 12, I don't remember. But they used Opus 2 Amon and compared it to Opus 9 Maya. Which Amon is a 4-cost 8K. He has to wait a turn, and he can dull himself to dull 1 forward. And the Maya just says when you go to your combat phase, select one of these 3 effects, and one of them is dull forward. So she can just for free dull 1 every turn, doesn't have to dull herself, etc. So just, and she's cheaper too. She's cheaper. Yeah, her body's smaller, but... So that would be my best way is... do it in an example. And if they're still holding on to it, challenge them to a match. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, you use these Opus 2, these Opus 3 cards, I'll use all these Opus 4 ones. And unless something goes horribly wrong, if you truly have power crept them, then I think that's going to be a pretty good demonstration of what it can do. Kurjan asks, what deck archetypes / playstyles would you like to see that haven't been possible thus far due to lack of cards / mechanics / rules? The first thing that comes to mind, play styles, would be, and I kind of mentioned this in an earlier question, alternate win conditions. I think milling your opponent should be a legitimate strategy, but I want to see it on something like Jace the Perfected Mind, like it is in Magic, which is my favorite Planeswalker. there's no, you don't just play that card and then, okay, I've milled your entire deck, I win. You have to either do it multiple times or you have to use other cards to assist it and get there. And your opponent is usually going to be able to tell, oh, okay, he's trying to mill me out. So they can react to it too, which is good. That's what you want. You want you and your opponent to have a back and forth. At least that's what I think you should have. I think that's what makes a great card game. I don't want an infinite loop mill like we have right now where, okay, in one turn, I just take you out in a single turn. Like, you know, I liked the Riku idea. I know Hobby Japan didn't. That's why they banned it. But I like the idea that you slowly use this card over and over again and mill it. Now, it'd be absurd today because there's so much activation. So, again, it would just become a loop. It would just be an infinite mill loop. But, again, it should be a style, not a, hey, I do this and I win. So, mill is definitely one as far as play styles. As far as, like, archetypes, I think something they could do better for the Final Fantasy game. To me, a lot of what brings people into this game, I know brought me into it, is if you love the game franchise, Final Fantasy, the video games, you want to play with your favorite characters. And I think they really miss the boat on that a lot of times. Even with the pushed categories, you know, we all know there's categories like Category 8 and Category 2 and Category 3 that they don't really get a lot of love. They're kind of clunky to work together. They just do the same characters over and over again. But even think of something popular like Category 7. You know, 7, the original 7 is one of my favorite Final Fantasy games. There's no good Sid Highwind. There's no good Vincent. There's no good Yuffie. I want to feel like I can put together the team from Final Fantasy 7 and play them against people. My party, when I played 7 the very first time, was Cloud, Vincent, and Sid. There's not really a combination where I can use those together. It's probably why the Guardian starter deck I enjoyed so much, because sans Kamari, sorry, Mr. Ronso, it felt like, oh, I actually have the party members of Yuna's Pilgrimage. I actually have the Summoner and her Guardians. That's cool. So I would like to see them do more of that, you know, give the character some love. FF9, yeah, this guy, you know, Zidane gets all the love in the world. Like, good for him that he gets a good card. Let me have a 9-focus deck, you know, with Zidane and Garnet and Steiner and Aiko and Amarant and Freya. You know, Freya isn't just exclusively a Dragoon. She can actually work with the FF9 team. So I really do think they could push categories a lot better than they do. You know, I want to feel like I'm playing the characters in the game. So do that. Tetris Limit Break Berlin asks, what is your favorite artwork for each rarity? Man, this is going to be difficult to answer because there's so much art in this game. And there's so many cards that, especially for like commons, like how do you pick commons? There's so many of them. Yeah, so I'm not sure I can give you a common or a rare, other than a rare like Last Swell comes to mind. But again, it's really more like the card itself than the artwork. Legends, it's got to be the FF6 stuff. So that was the very first Final Fantasy game I played. I actually have right here the Pixel Remaster came out recently. So I still have the old strategy guide for, well, this is the anthology. But I remember when I opened my very first, the like little instruction booklet that came with it. Actually, hold on. Okay, I have here my very original Final Fantasy III Super Nintendo instruction booklet that came with the game way back from 1991. And so the first thing I really knew about these characters was just this gorgeous, I want to see if I can put up for the camera, a mono art for the game. You look at these absolutely beautiful illustrations for the characters. There's Locke, there's Terra, there's Mog. Good old Edgar. And that's the Legend Edgar picture, right? So that's probably one of my favorites because, yeah, you know, it's just a nostalgic thing for me that I genuinely do like Amano's art, but this stuff just makes all, you know, there's Sabin. So to see any of these on the card, it's always going to be my favorite because there's just so much. I mean, look at this good Cyan art. Why haven't we seen this yet? Of Cyan just lounging on the chair. Freaking fantastic. You can tell how dusty this thing is. I haven't touched it in a minute, but we did just get that Gao art. That one on the side there from the booklet. But so yeah, this stuff has absolutely got to be my favorite. Any of the FF6 Amano art. Beyond that, any of the Amano art in general. There's that Bart's card. What was it? The light card from Opus 16 maybe, where it's him and Lena and the full moon's behind him. Oh my goodness, it's gorgeous. It's so gorgeous. I'm such a sucker for the Amano stuff. And it sucks too when they put that great art on a card that's not very good. Like the Mog, what was he, the Water Legend from Opus 15, the one that used crystals. That card wasn't bad, but I never was going to use it. I just wasn't really into the crystal stuff. So, like, unfortunately, I just didn't get to enjoy that art as much. But yeah, so it's got to be for the Legends and the Heroes, which the mono art is restricted to, is all the FF6 stuff. Beyond that, commons, rares, I'm sorry, there's just so many. I just couldn't say off the top of my head. There are some really nice looking full arts out there, and I've collected them, so let me see if I can just give you one off the top of my head. I will say this, I actually did really enjoy the World of Final Fantasy full arts. So I guess, yeah, the Lawn was a rare, the Luce was a common, the Rourke was a common. That art style from Opus 10, and the way those all work together, and they just had all this color behind them, like, those were beautiful. And I do have to say, I know it's an FF6 character, but it's not a mono art. That Realm from Opus 12, too, with like just the big paintbrushes and everywhere. Gorgeous, gorgeous. There's some absolutely gorgeous art in this game. There's some duds, too. There's a lot of just screenshots that don't look nearly as good. But, man, like when they put some effort into it, it looks beautiful, and it's absolutely appreciated. Pandas asks, what do you think is the most competitive rogue/non-meta deck against the current Opus 19 metagame? That is a good question. So I think something that has been slept on since it came out, I still to this day think it's one of the best decks, is Sky Pirates. Ever since Opus 15, I think Sky Pirates are just fantastic. The way they work, the way they interact with a lot of the stuff, the way they basically don't let you interact. But FF does have this really weird, I think my friend Ghoul described it as like a new toy problem, where even if we'll get a new toy and then we just completely forget about other stuff, or we just don't want to play it anymore, people get bored. I don't know. Like that Vaughn still says every time you target anything on my board, I get to reactivate stuff for free. Imagine against Ice Earth. Every time they try to dull freeze something on your board, you activate backups. So your backups are basically immune to activation, or to being dull frozen. You're always set up to Althea. You're always set up to Chocobo. You basically can't lose any kind of like power-related trade, because you can dull everything with Balthier and just keep bumping stuff. And again, if they target it, you just do it over and over again. It's kind of immune to board wipes because the kites just triggers the Vaughn and all that. Legit, I think the only thing that deck loses to is EX Burst, because it can just kill the kites, and then it's like, oh, okay, I'm not allowed to respond to it, so I can't pop it in response. So, and again, it's from a power level standpoint, it should be meta, right? It absolutely is, but just nobody plays it. Why? Couldn't tell you. Dalton asks, do you still plan to do set reviews of new cards being released? That was just a YouTube question, but yes, I am. I love doing those with Eureka. Hopefully he likes doing them with me as well. His Q&A is actually, if you could add one mechanic from a different card game to FFTCG, what would it be and why? Off the top of my head, I'll just say what I'm enjoying the most, which is Planeswalkers from Magic the Gathering. And I think that would fit well in FF, in the sense that FF has these big protagonists and larger than life characters, right? You've got your Zidanes, you've got your Clouds. So what if, instead of Cloud just being one of many forwards in your deck, or a backup, what if he was this, super guy, again, maybe not Commander style, maybe not where it's this totally different Commander style of play, but that he comes in as this Planeswalker, or whatever the FF equivalent would be. And so it's a big deal when Cloud comes down, or it's a big deal when Tidus comes down. That Shantoto appears, or Noctis appears, and oh man, look out, the Noctis is here. And that's what I love about the Planeswalkers in Magic. It feels like a big deal when they come down. And mechanically, they're insanely interesting too, because they have these loyalty counters, and then they usually have 3 abilities, sometimes 2, maybe sometimes 4, and you can like increase them and then decrease them, and they have different effects, and usually they all have like a super ultimate that you rarely get to, but it's like, ooh, if I get to that. And your opponent can interact with them too, right? They don't just sit there and say, okay, well, I get to win the game now. Your opponent can attack them, you can defend them. Like, mechanically, they're amazing, and they feel impactful. Like, even when my opponent plays one against me, oh crap, here comes Liliana the Veil. Oh crap, here comes Vraska's. Like, it would be cool to feel that in Final Fantasy, instead of, here's this Opus 19 Kefka forward. Oh, okay, well, he doesn't really do anything. What if, like, boom, Kefka, the angel, the heartless angel comes down, God Kefka, and it's like, oh crap, God Kefka's here. Okay, shit's getting real now. Like, That would be awesome. Kankoya, I'm totally butchering this, I'm sure. Kankuya asks, what is your favorite card in terms of flavor? Least favorite in terms of flavor? My favorite is probably the Opus, I think it's 15 or is it 16? The Go-Go, the Mono Art Go-Go that mimics an action ability from a monster or forward. Not only is it, so like that one's interesting because it's technically very simple, right? It just says, hey, copy an ability. But it's, of course, thematic for Go-Go because she's, whatever it is, a mimic. But it's so fun, too. Like, that flavor leads to a lot of interesting things mechanically. So that one is absolutely there. Probably my least favorite is, can I nominate every card named Kane? To be fair, there's some card named Canes that don't do this, but there's so many of them. You know, there's the Opus 6 one. When a Dark Forge, your opponent enters your field, they get control of Kane. The Win Kane changes sides if you don't have a crystal. The Brainwashing counter Kane. It's like, guys, okay, I get it. Like, yes, I know he's mind if you haven't, spoiler alert, if you haven't played Final Fantasy IV, Golbez mind controls him at some point throughout the story, so he turns against your party. But it's just like, okay, I got it. Like, you don't need to do that on so many Canes. You can just make a good Cane. You really can. So I do think sometimes they go too in on the flavor. That's one of them. Another one being like the Sabin card. And I'll say it because I genuinely like this card, but the Opus 17 Sabin, where his chakra ability, or what was known as mantra in the SNES version, right? Yeah, let me read this to you right from this guide since I've got it here. Mantra, RLRLXY. Sabin's mantra brings hit point recovery to the members of his party. Doesn't affect Sabin, just the members of his party. And like, is that thematic? Yes, but it makes the card worse, I think, at the expense of flavor. So I don't like that. Flavor should never hamper a card. Like, I think the power level would have been fine. It's not like, oh, Sabin's a busted card if he suddenly affects himself as well with that. You know, it's a special ability. It should be strong. So, yeah, don't let flavor override. So those are my answers. Dragonlord asks, why does it seem like only main characters are printed at legend rarity? And is that an issue that side characters don't see any legends or heroes? Parentheses, my point being there were 14 Noctises before we got a second Gladiolus 10 Opuses later. Very simple answer for you, Dragonlord. I have no idea. So I will say I don't really get hung up on rarity. My buddy Ghoul and I talk about this a lot, but like he's really into, I can't believe that's a common. I can't believe that's a rare. Like, I don't care. I don't think a legend only the legend should be good, or the common should always be trash. Like, just make interesting cards, interesting good cards. The rarities, whatever. I don't get hung up on that as much. However, I do understand your frustration and yeah, fully wonder that myself. Why do they just print the main characters over and over again? I'm told, or I hear that, well, like Lightning. Lightning gets so many cards because she's insanely popular in Japan. Okay, I would love to see some sales data that shows that matters. Like, is there someone out there who likes Final Fantasy and likes the Final Fantasy trading card game, maybe plays it casually or competitively, goes to tournaments, but will not buy a new set unless Lightning is in there? Very doubtful of that. I think, I don't know. So again, with no insight from the dev team, I can just quote someone I respect a lot, what they said, which is that they think they just have their favorites. You know, they like Zidane or they like Lightning, and so they just make them. I was playing Final Fantasy Theater Rhythm the other day, and in the Final Fantasy VIII team, like little characters you get Squall, Rinoa, Laguna, and Cypher. And then you unlock, I think, Adia and Ultimecia when you beat it, maybe even Gilgamesh. So, no Quistis, no Zell, no Selphie, no Irvine. These are people you have on your team, and you go through the entire game with once you get them, and they just get no love and no respect. Versus Cypher, like, I don't even like Cypher that much, and he was your enemy. You have him on your team for a very short period. Why does he always get publicity? Why does Laguna? Like, I like Laguna as a character, but he's not one of your main team members. They get no love. Same with the Final Fantasy IX people, like Amarant. Gosh, that dude, I mean, not that he was like some great character or anything, but at least he was a member of your team. Gets zero love, zero respect. So why they do it, I can't give you a reason that's concrete. not having the retainers come out in Opus 15. That was the last time you were going to have an Opus match, an actual game that's out. 15 for Cat 15. Noctis was a legend. Arden was a dark legend. And the retainers didn't show up. Why? Yeah, why does Gladiolus only have 2 cards? Why is it they're almost the same card? Well, he gets cheaper and he's a big guy if Noctis is there. Couldn't tell you. It's I find it frustrating, but I don't have an actual, like, I wish I could give you a concrete answer. Oh, it's because XYZ. I can give you all the speculation, all the theories I've heard, but yeah, couldn't actually tell you. Formerly Unknown asks, opinions on the speed of the game, sideboard, best of 3. How would you like to see the competitive format play out now that organized play is beginning again? Well, if it were up to me, I would change some things. So immediately, probably a bunch of people already don't want to hear what I have to say and say, nope, you're wrong. Game's the best it's ever been. Don't change anything. Because we definitely have a lot of folks who never want to change anything. Yeah, so if you have sideboard, obviously you have to have best of 3. I don't know how a sideboard would work in a best of 1 unless like midway through the match, you're like, hey, you get to swap half your deck out. There's so many cards that we've all mentioned that would be, what a great sideboard card, right? I know Ice has several. Sid Randell, Gentiana. Those cards are interesting and they can carry certain games against certain matchups, but then in other matchups are terrible. They would be absolutely perfect for a sideboard. Best of 3, I would 100% be in favor of. I know it's a longer day. Again, trust me, I've played Magic in person, and yes, there are times that at Magic I'm like, man, I almost kind of wish this was just best of 1 so I could get on with my day. However, it eliminates a lot of the randomness, right? Not entirely. I've had best of 3s where I draw terrible hands 3 games in a row, 2 games in a row. So it's not perfect. Nothing is. But I think most people would even feel better that, okay, well, you know, I drew terribly the first game, but I had a good chance the second game. Even though I lost, at least I had a better chance. Because it feels terrible to be in a tournament and then, okay, here we go. Let's win this tournament. Let's play this tournament. Oh, look at that. An absolutely garbage hand. And okay, I've already lost the game before it began. So I would be fine with that. Yes, it'd be a longer day, but I think FF is still a small enough player-based market that I think it would be fine. Competitive format play out. I do love the 2-deck format, though I can understand why they kind of save that for like Nationals, probably Worlds. Which is, I think that's okay. Make that a little more special. I'm not necessarily opposed to you just having to go in on one entire deck. I've wanted to change the time rules forever. I think overtime should be timed as well. I think it should be, you know, if you get 30 minutes for your match, you get 3 turns for the overtime, but that's completely untimed. And I've seen that section of overtime go to the same length as a normal timed match. Like, nope, you should have an additional 10 minutes. Basically, each player has 5 minutes. You know, and they can break that down even further, 2.5 minutes per turn to do something. Like, we've got to get this wrapped up. We've got to go. And then also, I don't think there should be double losses. There should be ties. I've heard so many reasons and excuses why it should be double loss, and I've never liked a single one of them. Not a single one of them has made sense. And I've got data that flies in the face of every answer I've ever been given. Everything else has ties. What's wrong with a tie? Ties are fine. And that's okay. Like, it's almost viewed as some sort of like mark of shame. Oh, it's a tie. Okay, well, a tie happens. If we're both playing control decks, if we both are, you know, thinking through our turns, okay, it goes to a tie. Like, I don't know. I think the double losses are silly. Now, are they going to change any of that? No, absolutely not. It'll just stay the way it is. But of course, if I had the keys to the kingdom, that's what I would do. All right, and the last question for this week, Spirit Edge 3033 asks, current favorite TCG to actually play? I have a very specific answer for you, Spirit Edge, and that is Magic the Gathering Arena. So the online application for Magic the Gathering. I think Arena is way more fun to play than it is to actually physically play Magic in person. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the social element, but Arena is so smooth and just, it's smooth, it's quick, it's got everything I would want from an FF game. If Final Fantasy had a game like Arena, oh my gosh, I'd probably be addicted and spending too much money on it and everything else. You know, there's quotes from the characters, there's cool little animations. It's very intuitive. Like, I showed it to my girlfriend, you know, and she'd never played Magic before, and she very quickly picked it up. It does a good job of highlighting, hey, here's what you can play this turn, here's what you can't. It moves quickly. There's a rope timer for every turn. So your opponent can't just sit there forever and ever and ever. Eventually they'll get some timeouts, but it'll time them. Come on, we got to keep this game moving. Got to keep this game moving. It's so easy to scroll over a card and it blows up. And, if you're new to the game, haste, flying, what are those? Oh, okay. It tells me right there what it does. It's just fantastic. In particular, shuffling your opening hand in Magic, real Magic with cards is miserable to do because your mulligan, if you have 7, you hate them, you have to shuffle it back into the deck, reshuffle it, hand it to your opponent, they cut it, draw 7 new cards, and then if God help you if you have to do that again, it takes so much time and you're on the clock that whole time. Whereas on Arena, I don't like this hand, you click the mulligan button, here's the new hand. It's beautiful, it's quick, it's smooth, it's interactive. It is my favorite TCG to play, is that specific form of Magic. And same thing with like the counters. You make all these tokens when you're actually at a Magic table. You got to sit there and find, where's my token card? Let me use these dice. Oh wait, here we go. I've got this. And then your sleeves are falling all over. Okay, I've got this treasure token, and then I'll put a die on that. Oh, and this gets a counter, and then on Arena, it automates all that for you. Hey, here's 8 soldier tokens that get counters. Boom, done. Beautiful, love it. It's absolutely awesome. So yeah, that's my favorite. All right, and that should do it for the April 24th edition of Questions and Answers. Thank you for everyone who submitted your questions. I hope you got some satisfying answers. I think I got to almost everything. There might have been 1 or 2 that I didn't get in this session, but I will get them in the next session. If you would like a question answered, feel free to leave it in the comments below on this video. Put the Q&A title as you saw in some of these comments so I know it's specifically for a video, or you can ask it. I've got a Discord section specifically for the Q&A answers. Feel free to leave them in there. Happy to answer them. Remember, it doesn't have to be exclusively about FFTCG. It can be about life, video games, music, state of the universe, whatever's on your mind. So I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people who submitted and getting to answer them. Thank you. Feel free to do it again. And until next time, take care.